The thunderous crack of splintering wood echoed across the fjord as Perrin Knutson's longship breached the monastery walls. His men leapt from the dragon-headed vessel, axes glinting in the pale winter light. Blood-splattered and grim-faced, Perrin led them through the stone corridors, his reputation as the Heartless One preceding him like a dark shadow. "Take everything of value," he commanded, his voice as cold as the northern winds. "Leave nothing behind." The monks fled before them, their terrified prayers falling on deaf ears. Perrin had long ago stopped hearing the pleas of the weak. The gods had taken everything from him, his wife, his child, his capacity for mercy. Now he served only Odin's call to glory and wealth. As his men gathered gold and silver, Perrin stalked through the monastery alone. The Christians' God held no power over him. Their faith had not protected them from his fury, just as the gods had not protected what he loved from death's cold embrace. In a small chamber, he discovered an ornate chest. Breaking the lock with one powerful strike of his axe, he lifted the lid to find scrolls and a strange artifact, a small figurine carved from whalebone. He turned it over in his calloused hands, feeling a strange pull toward the delicate craftsmanship. "The Norns weave as they will," he muttered, tucking it into his belt pouch. 5 winters had passed since he had sworn his oath beneath the great ash tree. No woman would ever again hold power over his heart. Love was weakness, and Perrin Knutson would never be weak again. The raid complete, he signaled his men back to the ships. As they rowed away from the burning monastery, Perrin gazed at the distant shore with hollow eyes. The weight of his vengeance felt no lighter for its fulfillment. The blood of his enemies did not warm the frozen chambers of his heart. 3 days later, Perrin's longships returned to their settlement at Ravholm. The fjord welcomed them home, its dark waters reflecting the wooden houses and smoke-filled great hall that crowned the hillside. Children ran to meet the returning warriors, women gathered to welcome husbands and sons, but Perrin walked alone to his hall, carrying his share of the plunder. Jarl Perrin returns victorious again, called Tormund, his second in command. Let the Skald sing of the Heartless One's triumphs. Perrin ignored the cheers. Glory held no sweetness when there was no one to share it with. That night, as his hall filled with celebrating warriors, he sat alone at the high table, watching the revelry with disinterest. The mead tasted of nothing in his mouth, the music fell hollow on his ears. Later, as the celebration continued, he retreated to his private chambers where he examined the strange figurine again. It depicted a woman with flowing hair, her hands raised as if in blessing or warning. As he turned it in his fingers, a voice called from the doorway. "My Jarl," said Tormund, "the coastal settlements report Saxon raids growing bolder. They've taken thralls from 3 villages." Perrin's hand closed around the figurine. "Then we shall remind them why they fear us. We sail at first light." The gods, it seemed, had more blood to demand of him. Dawn broke cold and grey over Ravholm. As Perrin's longships cut through the churning sea, a storm gathered on the horizon. By midday, fierce winds battered their vessels, driving them off course. Lightning split the sky, and Thor's hammer seemed determined to sink them beneath the waves. "The gods test us!" Perrin shouted over the howling gale. "Hold fast!" But the storm proved stronger than even Viking determination. A massive wave crashed over Perrin's ship, sweeping men into the merciless sea. The last thing he remembered was the cold embrace of dark water. He awoke to gentle hands pressing something warm to his lips. "Drink," said a woman's voice, unfamiliar and accented. Perrin's eyes flickered open. He lay in a small hut, firelight casting shadows on the walls. Leaning over him was a woman with hair the color of autumn leaves, her gray eyes watching him warily. "Where am I?" he demanded, reaching for weapons that weren't there. "You are in my home," she answered in halting Norse. "Your ship broke on our shores. You alone survived. Perrin attempted to rise but fell back with a groan. His side was wrapped in linen, blood seeping through. Be still, she commanded. The wound will open. You're Saxon, he accused, noting her accent and clothing. I am Valora Wick, she replied, lifting her chin. And you are fortunate I found you before my kinsmen did. They would not show mercy to a Viking raider. His hand instinctively went to his belt pouch, finding it still attached. The bone figurine remained within. Why save me, Saxon? You know what my people do to yours. Valora's mouth tightened. I know all too well. Your kind killed my husband 3 summers past. She pushed a cup of something bitter toward him. Drink. It will help the fever. Then why not let me die? Because, she said, turning away, I will not become what I hate. Days passed as Perrin regained his strength. The hut, he learned, stood isolated on the edge of a cliff, far from the nearest village. Valora lived alone, gathering herbs and healing the sick who sought her out. The locals called her a wise woman, some whispered but her skills were too valuable to drive her away. You should not have survived, she told him one evening as she changed his bandages. The sea claimed all your men, and your wounds were grave. Yet here you are. The Norns have not finished with me, Perrin replied grimly. My fate is not to die in the sea. You speak of fate as if it's decided. Do your gods not allow for choice? Perrin watched her hands working, gentle despite her clear disdain for him. My choices were taken from me long ago. I follow the path laid before me. And that path is blood and vengeance. Her eyes met his, challenging. It is the Viking way. Is it? Or merely your way? She finished binding his wound and stood. Rest. Tomorrow you will tell me how you plan to return to your people without being killed by mine. That night, as wind howled outside the small hut, Perrin dreamed of his lost wife, Astrid, and their infant son. In his dream, Astrid pointed toward the east, where Valora slept, then faded like morning mist. He woke with tears on his cheeks for the first time in 5 years. The following days established an uneasy routine. Valora tended his wounds and gathered food, while Perrin regained his strength by completing small tasks around the hut. Each night they talked by the fire, their conversations moving from terse exchanges to genuine dialogue. Why do you live alone? He asked her one evening. Valora stared into the flames. After my husband died, his family blamed me for not giving him children. The village whispered that my healing knowledge was unnatural. She shrugged. It was easier to leave than to fight their fear. Your people are fools to cast aside someone of your skill. She looked at him with surprise. And would your people be different? Perrin thought of the wise women among his clan, respected but often feared. Perhaps not, he admitted. As weeks passed, Perrin's strength returned. He began helping Valora with heavier tasks, chopping wood, hunting small game, repairing the roof damaged by winter storms. They fell into a rhythm that felt strangely comfortable. One day, while Valora collected herbs in the nearby forest, Perrin heard unfamiliar voices approaching. He grabbed a wood-cutting axe and concealed himself just as 3 Saxon men appeared at the clearing's edge. The witch must be home, one said, pointing to smoke rising from the chimney. We should burn this place, another suggested. Eldrick says she's harboring a demon. No one survives the sea as that man did. Eldrick wants her land, the third replied. But I'm not crossing Valora. My son lives because of her medicines. The men left minutes before Valora returned. Perrin told her what he'd overheard. Eldrick has wanted this land since my husband died, she said, her face tight with worry. "He's been turning the village against me." "Who is this man?" "The village headman's son. He fancies himself a lord." She began sorting her gathered herbs with trembling hands. "Perhaps it is time I moved elsewhere." "You would abandon your home to this man?" "What choice do I have? I am one woman alone." "Not alone," Perrin said, surprising himself. "Not anymore." That night, as they ate a simple meal, Perrin asked about the figurine he'd taken from the monastery. "May I see it?" Valora requested. When he placed it in her palm, she gasped. "This is old magic. It's a protection charm, carved by my mother's people to the north." "Your mother wasn't Saxon." "She was taken in a raid," Valora explained. "A thrall who earned her freedom and married a Saxon man. She taught me the old ways alongside Christian prayers." Her finger traced the figurine's features. "This is Freya's blessing, meant to guide lost hearts home." Perrin felt a chill crawl up his spine. "And it led me to you." Their eyes met across the firelight, and something shifted between them. The following day, as Perrin split wood outside the hut, riders appeared on the horizon. He counted 6 men, Eldrick leading them. "Valora," he called urgently. She emerged from the hut, face paling at the sight. "They've come for you." "For us." "Stay behind me," he instructed, gripping the axe. The riders stopped at a distance. Eldrick, a broad-shouldered man with a cruel mouth, dismounted. "So the rumors are true," he called. "The healer harbors a Northman savage." "This man is under my protection," Valora replied, stepping forward despite Perrin's warning. "He has done no harm here. His kind raided Wexford last moon," Eldrick spat. "Killed a dozen men and took women and children as slaves. All Northmen are murderers." Perrin straightened to his full height. "As all Saxons are cowards who attack lone women," he challenged in their tongue, surprising them. Eldrick's face darkened with rage. "Step aside, witch. We'll take the Viking for justice." "There is no justice in murder," Valora countered. "Leave my land." "Your land?" Eldrick laughed. "A widow with no protector has no claim. The headman has granted these fields to me." "Your father has no authority here," Valora said. "This land was my husband's, now mine." "A woman cannot hold property without male kin," Eldrick sneered. "Unless you've taken this heathen to your bed?" "Is that it, Valora? So desperate for a man you'd lie with our enemy?" Perrin stepped forward, rage burning through his veins. "Speak to her with respect, or I'll take your tongue." One of Eldrick's men narked an arrow to his bow. "Give us the Northman, Valora, and we might forget your treachery." Valora looked from the armed men to Perrin, indecision clear in her eyes. "Go inside," Perrin told her quietly. "This is not your fight. They'll kill you." "Perhaps." He smiled grimly. "Or perhaps Thor will favor me today." Before she could respond, Eldrick gave a signal, and the archer loosed his arrow. Perrin shoved Valora aside and swung his axe, deflecting the shaft. With a Viking war cry, he charged. What followed was chaos. Perrin fought like a berserker, his axe finding flesh twice before a blow to the head sent him to his knees. Through blurred vision, he saw Valora screaming, running toward him as Eldrick raised his sword for a killing stroke. Then, impossibly, thunder cracked from a clear sky. A bolt of lightning struck the ground between them, sending men and horses scattering in terror. "Witch!" Eldrick cried, scrambling backward. "Devil woman!" Valora helped Perrin to his feet as the Saxons retreated. "They'll be back," she said grimly, with more men. Then we must be gone before they return, Perrin replied, blood streaming down his face. Do you know the coast? Where I might find my people? She nodded slowly. There's a trading post 3 days' journey north. Vikings sometimes come there. Then we leave at first light. That night, as Valora tended his wounds, Perrin caught her hand. That lightning, was it truly your doing? She smiled mysteriously. My mother taught me many things. Not all healing is for bodies. You're a Volva, he said with newfound respect. A seer. I am what I need to be to survive, she replied, freeing her hand gently. As are you, Perrin Knutson. He looked at her sharply. How do you know my name? I never told you. You speak in your sleep, she said, turning away. Your nightmares are vivid. Shame washed over him. What else did I reveal? You call for Astrid. And for Leaf. Her eye softened. Your wife and son? Perrin stared into the fire. Dead 5 winters ago. Sickness took them while I was raiding. I returned to find them already in the ground. The familiar pain rose like bile in his throat. I swore never to love again. The gods are cruel to take what we cherish. Valora sat beside him. My husband died in my arms. I begged God to take me too. Her hand found his in the firelight. Yet here we are, still breathing. To what purpose? He asked bitterly. Perhaps to find each other, she suggested. Perhaps fate is not always cruel. Dawn found them gathering what they could carry. Valora took little, some herbs, a few precious tools, and a small wooden cross that had belonged to her husband. As she closed the door on her home for the last time, Perrin saw grief pass across her face. We could stay and fight, he offered. She shook her head. There is nothing here worth dying for. They traveled north, keeping to forests and hills to avoid detection. Valora knew the land intimately, guiding them to fresh water and shelter. At night, they shared stories of their people, finding surprising similarities between their different worlds. On the second day, they encountered a family fleeing Viking raids further north. Seeing Perrin, the father drew his knife, pushing his wife and children behind him. Wait, Valora called in Saxon. We mean no harm. We seek only to pass. He's one of them, the man accused, pointing at Perrin. The demons who burned our village. Perrin stepped forward slowly, hands empty. I am not your enemy today, he said in their tongue. Where are these raiders from? The man hesitated. They came in 3 ships. Their shields bore black ravens. Perrin's jaw tightened. Skard's clan. They raid where I have claimed protection. He turned to Valora. These raiders violate our agreements. They dishonor all Vikings by attacking settlements under my protection. The Saxon family watched this exchange with confusion. Let us help you, Valora said to them. The night grows cold, and your children are tired. That night, they shared their food with the family. Perrin showed the children how to fashion small wooden animals, whittling them with surprising gentleness. When the youngest girl fell asleep against his side, Valora saw something soften in his eyes. The following morning, Perrin gave the family directions to a safe settlement and half of their provisions. As they parted ways, the father nodded respectfully to him. Not all Northmen are demons, it seems, he said. Nor all Saxons weak, Perrin replied. They reached the trading post by midday. It was a bustling place where Saxon, Frank, and Norse merchants exchanged goods. Perrin kept his head covered, but his height and bearing drew attention. There, Valora pointed to the harbor. Viking ships. 3 longships were docked at the shore. Perrin recognized the shield patterns immediately. My clan, he said with relief. They search for survivors. As they approached the harbor, Vikings loading supplies noticed them. Shouts went up, and suddenly they were surrounded by warriors with drawn weapons. Jarl Perrin, one called in disbelief. By Thor's hammer, you live. Tormund pushed through the crowd, his face transforming from shock to joy. We thought the sea had taken you. We searched for days. Perrin clasped his friend's arm. The Norns had other plans. Tormund's eye shifted to Valora. And who is this? This is Valora, Perrin said. She saved my life and sheltered me when I was wounded. Murmur spread through the gathered Vikings. A Saxon woman helping their Jarl? Unheard of. She comes under my protection, Perrin declared loudly. Any man who dishes her answers to me. The warriors nodded, though suspicion lingered in their eyes. We sail with the tide, Tormund said. The clan awaits news of your survival. As preparations continued, Perrin took Valora aside. You have a choice, he told her. Stay here among your people, or come with me to Ravhome. Valora glanced at the Vikings loading the ships, then back to the trading post. What place would a Saxon healer have among Vikings? A place of honor, he promised. Our people respect healing arts. And what would I be to you? She asked directly. The question hung between them, demanding truth. Perrin touched the figurine in his pouch, remembering Astrid's ghost pointing east. Whatever you wish to be, he answered carefully. I offer protection and respect. The rest, time will tell. Valora studied his face. I have lost one home today. I'm not eager to find myself unwelcome in another. On that, you have my word, Perrin said. No harm will come to you in Ravhome. As the tide turned, Valora made her choice. She boarded Perrin's ship, her red hair bright against the grey sea. The Vikings watched her curiously but kept their distance out of respect for their Jarl. The journey to Ravhome took 5 days. At first, Valora stayed close to Perrin, uncomfortable among so many Viking warriors. But gradually, her healer's instincts emerged. When one man sliced his hand on a rope, she treated the wound with herbs she carried. When another suffered from seasickness, she prepared a remedy. By journey's end, the warriors had begun to accept her presence, some even seeking her advice for old injuries. Your men warm to me, she observed to Perrin as Ravhome appeared on the horizon. They recognize value, he replied. A skilled healer is worth more than gold. And is that all I am? She asked. A valuable asset? Perrin turned to face her fully, away from watching eyes. You are more than I dared hope to find when the sea took me, Valora. But I have nothing to offer except a scarred heart and a blood-soaked past. Perhaps that is enough, she said quietly. My heart bears its own scars. Ravhome welcomed their Jarl's return with celebration. Horns blew, people lined the shore, and ships filled the harbor to witness the miracle. Perrin the Heartless returned from Rant's watery embrace. But whispers followed Valora as she walked beside him. A Saxon woman? In their midst? Some welcomed the healer, others eyed her with suspicion and distrust. In the great hall that night, as mead flowed freely and Skald sang of Perrin's miraculous survival, an older warrior named Guthrum approached the high table. Jarl Perrin, he called loudly, silencing the hall. We rejoice at your return. But you bring a Saxon into our midst when their kind raid our southern settlements. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the gathering. Perrin rose slowly. This woman saved my life when her people would have taken it. She abandoned her home to warn us of Saxon movements. She is under my protection. Protection is one thing, Guthrum pressed. But she sits at your right hand, in the place of honor. Some whisper you bring her as more than a guest. Valora tensed beside him, feeling the weight of hundreds of hostile stares. Speak plainly, Guthrum, Perrin challenged. Will you take a Saxon to wife, when you have refused every Norse woman since Astrid's death? Will our Jarl give his heart to our enemy? The hall erupted in shouts, some defending Perrin's right to choose, others agreeing with Guthrum's concern. Perrin raised his hand for silence. When the hall quieted, he spoke with deadly calm. 5 winters ago, I swore never to love again. That oath stands. He looked at Valora apologetically before continuing. Valora Cadewick is here as a healer and as my guest. Nothing more. Pain flashed across Valora's face before she masked it. The Vikings seemed satisfied with this declaration, and the celebration resumed. But something had broken between them. Later, in the private chamber prepared for her, Valora refused to meet Perrin's eyes. I understand your position, she said stiffly. You need not explain further. Valora, you have kept your word. I am safe here. That is enough. She turned away. Good night, Jarl Perrin. Days passed with a new distance between them. Valora established herself as a healer, earning grudging respect from the Vikings as her skills became evident. She learned their language more fluently, adopted some of their dress, and kept largely to herself. Perrin watched her integration from afar, respect growing as she faced each challenge with quiet dignity. Yet each night he returned alone to his hall, the emptiness more profound than before. 1 month after their return, news arrived that shattered their fragile peace. Saxon raiders had attacked Viking settlements to the south, led by Eldrick. They had taken thralls and burned 3 villages in what was clearly a coordinated campaign. They take revenge for perceived wrongs, Tormund reported in the War Council. They carry banners with your name, Jarl Perrin, marked for death. All eyes turned to Valora. The woman knows this leader, Guthrum accused. Perhaps she is his spy. Enough, Perrin commanded. Valora, what can you tell us of Eldrick's capabilities? She stepped forward, pale but composed. Eldrick is ambitious and cruel. He has been gathering men for months, promising them Viking plunder. He knows I fled with you and would use that to rally others to his cause. And why would they follow him against seasoned Viking warriors? Tormund asked. Because he tells them I practice witchcraft, Valora replied steadily. That I've ensorcelled your Jarl and plan to open your settlements to Saxon attacks from within. Shocked murmurs filled the hall. My presence endangers you, she concluded. Perhaps it would be best if I left. To go where? Perrin demanded. Anywhere my presence does not bring war. The council erupted in debate. Some argued for immediate retaliation against the Saxon raiders, others suggested using Valora as bait to draw Eldrick into a trap. Silence! Perrin roared finally. We will not use Valora as bait, nor will she leave unless it is her choice. He fixed Guthrum with a hard stare. And we will not doubt her loyalty without cause. What do you propose, Jarl? Tormund asked. We send a delegation to the Saxon headman Eldrick's father. We offer terms for peace. Disbelief greeted this suggestion. Peace? With Saxons? Guthrum scoffed. Have you truly been bewitched? Endless raiding serves neither side, Perrin argued. We trade with Saxons at the ports. Why not establish formal boundaries? Agreements of mutual protection. Because they are our enemies, someone called. Are they? Perrin challenged. Or have we made them so? Their villages burn as ours do. Their women mourn as ours do. He looked at Valora. They love as we love. A heavy silence fell over the hall. I will lead this delegation, Perrin declared. Those who wish to accompany me may do so. The rest will prepare our defenses in case diplomacy fails. That night, Valora came to Perrin's private chambers, her face grave. You risk everything on this gamble, she said without preamble. Some things are worth the risk. Your life? Your people's trust. She stepped closer. Why? Perrin reached for the bone figurine he still carried. Because you showed me another path besides endless vengeance. Because the cycle of blood must end somewhere. He took her hand. Because I lied in the great hall when I said my oath still stands. Valora's breath caught. What are you saying? I sailed to face your people not just for peace between our kinds, he admitted, but for my own peace. The oath I swore was made in grief and rage. It no longer serves me. And what would serve you now? She asked softly. A future not written in blood. His calloused fingers traced her cheek. A future with you, if you would have a scarred Viking who is learning, too slowly perhaps, that love is not weakness but the greatest strength. Valora's eyes glistened. You risk much for this belief. I risk everything, he agreed. As you did when you saved an enemy from the sea. 3 days later, 2 Viking longships approached the Saxon coast under flags of truce. Perrin stood at the prow, Valora beside him. They had agreed she would act as translator and intermediary, her knowledge of both peoples invaluable to the peace process. They were met on the shore by armed Saxon warriors, suspicious but maintaining the truce. Eldric was noticeably absent, but his father, headman Cedric, led the reception. The Northman Jarl seeks audience, their spokesman announced in Saxon. Cedric, an older version of his son with the same hard eyes but deeper lines of wisdom, stepped forward. Why should I treat with raiders who have plagued our shores for generations? Valora translated, and Perrin responded with dignity. Because blood calls for blood without end. Because both our peoples suffer while only the ravens feast. The delegation was escorted to the village hall under heavy guard. Inside, Perrin presented his proposal, designated trading zones, mutual defense against outside threats, and reparations for recent damages on both sides. And what guarantee have we that your word will be kept? Cedric demanded. Vikings are known for treachery. As are Saxons, Perrin countered evenly. Which is why I propose an exchange of hostages, honorable men and women who will live among the other people for 1 year, ensuring compliance. This bold suggestion created an uproar among both parties. Hostage exchanges were traditional but usually followed military defeats, not voluntary agreements. And who would you offer? Cedric asked skeptically. Myself, Perrin answered. I would remain here while Tormund leads my people. And I ask that you send someone of equal rank to live among the Vikings. Shocked silence followed this declaration. Valora stared at Perrin, understanding dawning in her eyes. This was never just about peace between peoples, it was about finding a way for them to be together that both sides could accept. Before Cedric could respond, commotion erupted outside. Eldric burst into the hall with a dozen armed men. Treachery, he shouted. The Vikings bring a small force as distraction while their ships approach from the north. Perrin's men reached for weapons, but Perrin commanded them to stand down. This is false, he declared. We come in honest peace. Valora stepped forward, addressing Cedric directly. Headman, I have lived among these Vikings for 2 moons. They honor their oaths as fiercely as Saxons. Jarl Perrin offers genuine peace. The witch defends her master, Eldric sneered. Father, these Northmen killed Edgar and Wulfric last moon. Would you break bread with their murderers? Those raiders were not mine, Perrin insisted through Valora's translation. I come to end such attacks, not condone them. Cedric wavered, looking between his son and the Viking Jarl. There is a simple way to prove intentions, Valora suggested. Send scouts north. If Viking ships mass there as Eldric claims, execute us all. If not, consider that your son may have other motives. Eldric's face darkened. You dare question me, witch? I question why you interrupted peace talks with false accusations, she replied steadily. Cedric studied his son's face, then nodded to a guard. Send riders north. Return with all haste. The tense wait that followed stretched nerves to breaking. Eldric paced like a caged animal while Perrin remained seated, outwardly calm. Valora moved between them, continuing to translate discussions of terms despite the charged atmosphere. When the scouts finally returned, their report was clear: no Viking ships approached from the north. Cedric turned to his son. Explain yourself, Eldric. They hide their forces well, Eldric blustered. Or perhaps they ensorcelled our scouts as this witch has ensorcelled you all. Enough. Cedric's voice cracked like a whip. You dishonour yourself and our people with these lies. Understanding passed between father and son. Eldric's ambition had been laid bare, his willingness to sacrifice peace for personal vengeance exposed. Leave us, Cedric commanded his son. We will speak of your actions later. After Eldric's sullen departure, negotiations resumed in earnest. By nightfall, tentative terms had been agreed upon, including the extraordinary hostage exchange. As they prepared to leave, Cedric took Valora aside. You vouch for this Northman's honor. With my life, she replied without hesitation. Then perhaps there is hope for peace after all, the old headman sighed. I am weary of burying our young. The following weeks brought rapid change. Perrin took up residence in a Saxon home as promised, while Cedric's nephew came to Ravholm. Trade delegations traveled between settlements, and raids ceased on both sides. Valora moved freely between worlds, her unique position as both healer and interpreter making her invaluable to the peace process. More importantly, she and Perrin could finally be together openly, their relationship no longer scandalous but symbolic of the new alliance. 2 months into this arrangement, as summer warmed the land, Eldric made his move. With followers loyal to him, he attacked the Viking trading party visiting Saxon lands. Among the dead was Guthrum. Word reached Perrin as he worked alongside Saxon fishermen, learning their methods. His first instinct was rage, to summon his warriors and exact bloody vengeance. But as he stormed toward his quarters to retrieve his weapons, Valora intercepted him. This is exactly what Eldric wants, she warned. To provoke you into breaking the peace. Guthrum was no friend to you, but he was my sworn man, Perrin growled. Honor demands blood. And what of your oath to Cedric? What of our future? Perrin's hands clenched into fists. Would you have me do nothing while my man lies dead? I would have you seek justice, not vengeance, Valora replied. Eldric acts against his father's authority. Let Saxon law judge him first. Their argument was interrupted by Cedric's arrival. The headman's face was grave. My son has betrayed us all, he said without preamble. I have ordered his capture, but he has fled with his followers. I come to assure you the peace holds. Perrin struggled visibly with his rage. Your son has killed my sworn man. "And he will answer for it, with his life if necessary," Cedric promised. "But I ask you to let Saxon justice handle Saxon crimes. And if your justice fails, then I myself will deliver him to you." That night, as Perrin kept vigil for Guthrum in a Saxon manor, Valora sat beside him. "You showed great strength today," she said quietly. "It feels like weakness," he admitted. "My men will question my honor." "True strength often does feel like weakness," she replied, taking his hand. "Breaking cycles requires absorbing a blow without returning it." Perrin looked at her in the candlelight. "When did you become so wise?" "I had a good teacher," she smiled sadly. "A Viking who chose peace when war would have been easier." 2 days later, Eldrick was captured attempting to flee to the north. Saxon law demanded that he face the families of those he had wronged. In an unprecedented move, Cedric insisted that Perrin, as Guthrum's Jarl, be present for the judgment. The trial was brief. Evidence of Eldrick's crimes mounted, not just against Vikings but against his own people. Women testified to abuses, farmers to extortion, warriors to dishonorable tactics in battle. When judgment came, Cedric turned to Perrin. "By our law, the sentence is death. But as Guthrum was your man, I give you the right to determine how justice is served." The assembly fell silent, awaiting the Vikings' demand for blood. Eldrick knelt, defeated but defiant, clearly expecting a brutal end. Perrin approached slowly. "In my land," he said, Valora translating his words, "a murderer pays compensation to the victim's family, Wergild." Guthrum had no family but his oath brothers. He surveyed the gathered Saxons. "I claim Wergild not in silver but in service. Eldrick will live, but he is cast out," declared Nithing, "without honor. He will travel to the Christian monastery at Lindisfarne and labor there for 7 years, helping rebuild what Vikings like me once destroyed." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the crowd. Eldrick looked up in shock. "You spare me?" he asked incredulously. "No," Perrin replied coldly. "I sentence you to live with your shame, to labor in humility, and to contemplate the peace you tried to destroy." Valora's eyes shone as she translated these words. Cedric nodded slowly in approval. "So be it," the headman declared. "Eldrick is dead to his family and people until his sentence is complete. Guards will escort him to Lindisfarne at first light." As they left the assembly, Valora took Perrin's arm. "That was not the Viking way." "No," he agreed. "It was our way, the path between our peoples that we are forging together." By harvest time, the tentative peace had strengthened. Viking and Saxon communities began cautious interactions beyond mere trade. A few brave couples followed Perrin and Valora's example, creating bonds between the peoples that transcended old hatreds. On the autumn equinox, as both cultures celebrated the harvest, Cedric formally released Perrin from his hostage status, declaring the experiment successful. The same day, Tormund arrived with news that the Viking Council had voted to make the peace permanent. That night, under stars that watched both Saxon and Norse lands with equal indifference, Perrin knelt before Valora at the boundary stone that marked their people's territories. "5 winters ago, I vowed never to love again," he said, holding her hand in his. "I believed the gods had cursed me, that to love was to invite devastation. But you taught me that walls built against pain also block joy." He produced the bone figurine that had traveled with him from the monastery to her shore. "Freya's blessing brought me to you across hostile waters. Now I ask you to cross one more boundary, to be my wife, not as Saxon or Viking, but as the woman who melted a frozen heart." Valora touched the figurine, then Perrin's face. "The gods work in strange ways," she said softly. "They took everything from us so we could find each other." "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile breaking across his weathered face. Yes, she replied. In Saxon and Norse and every tongue between. Their hand-fasting ceremony became a symbol of the new alliance. Held at the midpoint between settlements, it combined both traditions. Saxon priests blessed their union alongside Norse goddesses who called upon Freya and Odin to witness their vows. As mead and ale flowed freely, former enemies found common ground in celebration. Cedric and Tormund, once bitter opponents, raised cups together to toast the couple. They say you were called the Heartless One, Cedric remarked to Perrin. An odd name for a man who risks everything for love. Names change as men do, Perrin replied. My heart died once, but she revived it. Across the gathering, Valora spoke with a group of young Saxon women curious about life among Vikings. Are they truly as fearsome as the stories say? One asked. Valora smiled, watching Perrin laugh with his warriors. They are fearsome in battle and faithful in love, she answered. Not so different from Saxon men, when you look beneath the surface. As the celebration continued, Perrin joined her, drawing her away from the crowds toward the cliffside where the sea stretched endless before them. The water that nearly claimed my life now joins our people's, he observed. The Norns weave strange patterns. Do you still believe fate controls all? Valora asked, leaning into his embrace. Perrin considered this, watching torchlight reflect in her eyes. I believe the gods open doors, he said finally. But we choose whether to walk through them. And you chose me, she said softly. As you chose me, he replied, when you pulled a half-drowned enemy from the sea. Their kiss sealed more than their union, it symbolized the healing of ancient wounds, the possibility that hatred could transform into understanding, that sworn enemies could find in each other's hearts not weakness, but their greatest strength. And on the cliffside where two worlds met, the bone figurine of Freya stood watching over them, its purpose fulfilled.